is an island. Now imagine that Manhattan was rapidly sinking, and by 2100 was forecasted to be nearly completely underwater. That is only 75 years away from now. Thankfully, Manhattan is not facing this immediate threat, though there are nations in our world that are. One of those nations is Tuvalu, and I'm pretty sure that none of you have ever heard of it, let alone can identify it on a map. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Neither can I. But here it is. It's right there, and it's very small. And I actually had the opportunity to interview the Tuvalu ambassador to the United Nations. And during this interview, instead of me posing a question to him, he asked me a question. He asked me, if my people are underwater, where are they going to go? And this is something that I had never even thought about. And so this situation poses unprecedented questions. And under the 4 criteria of what defines a state by the United Nations, there must be a permanent population and a defined territory. So what happens if a nation has neither of those? That could happen if a state like Vanuatu or Tuvalu goes underwater. And so, are their residents still granted citizenship? Are these nations still entitled to diplomatic representation at international bodies? The answers to these questions will determine the fate of a people with a unique and distinct cultural and national identity. And very few people in the United States know or are trying to solve this problem. So you may be asking, what am I doing? Why am I trying to solve this problem? My name is Gabriel Rhodes, and I believe that the true measure of a society is how well it treats its most vulnerable members. And so when I stumbled across this photo, the photo of the Tuvaluan foreign minister standing in the Pacific giving a speech, I thought it must just be a PR stunt. I was incredulous. No way could this actually be an issue that is so serious that the people of Tuvalu are facing. But after doing some more research, I realized that it was. The people of Tuvalu are in serious peril. They're in danger of losing their lives, their homes, their communities, and also their nation if no immediate action is taken. And this struck a nerve. And so for the past couple years of my life, I've extensively sought out opportunities where I can make a difference in people's lives through pursuing international relations. So why am I speaking to you today? I'm speaking to you because you too can make a difference in someone's life through civic action. I believe that the United Nations is the organization best positioned to solve the climate crisis. And so I wanted to learn more about multilateral diplomacy, which is what the United Nations is. It's a multilateral organization. And so I started reaching out to people on LinkedIn, professionals in the area of diplomacy. And after a lot of outreach and very few responses, I actually had my first interview with the United Nations ambassador. And after my first interview, I was absolutely hooked. Hearing and learning from people who had addressed these issues head on and had hands-on experience was absolutely thrilling. And I wanted to share my passion and excitement for diplomacy with other young people. As many people think that diplomacy is a field reserved for people who speak over 25 languages. They're polyglots, right? They're always wearing suits and ties, they're very serious, and they've lived in so many different countries. But that is not the case. I found that some of the most experienced diplomats in the world were more than willing and actually eager to speak to me as a young person and provide guidance and mentorship on how I can make a difference in the field of diplomacy. And so I started my own organization called Diplomacy Decoded, where I've interviewed over 25 United Nations ambassadors, a president, and even a United States Attorney General. And I publish these interviews on my website because I want to foster youth civic engagement for other young people. And after doing this and hearing all this amazing advice from different diplomats, I wanted to put it into action. And so last summer, I pursued the audacious goal of working at the United Nations as a high school student. No way was this possible. And for a little background, the United Nations is a body that consists of 193 member states. each of which has an embassy known as a mission to the United Nations. And so me, being a completely rational person, thought that in April, if I called all 193 member states, I would definitely be able to help one of them. And to only my surprise, basically none of them responded, except for around 5. And out of the 5 that responded, only 1 said yes. And that was the permanent mission of Afghanistan to the United Nations. On my first day working for the Afghan mission, I was absolutely overwhelmed. I got to learn about how the Taliban took over the nation's government and were systematically stripping away the rights of women, preventing them from going to school and even leaving their own homes. And so I wanted to learn more about Afghanistan during this experience, and I sought to immerse myself in its culture, its people, and its history. And I began drafting speeches for the chargé d'affaires, otherwise known as an ambassador, regarding human rights violations that women in Afghanistan were enduring. My boss at the time, the chargé d'affaires, actually gave me one piece of advice that was very lasting. He has lived in many different nations, advocating for the reconstruction of his home. And he said one thing that was really valuable on the first day. He said, "Speak and listen to everyone, because everyone has something to say that you have never even thought of." And this reaffirmed what I already knew through my interviews for Diplomacy Decoded. Everyone has something of valuable that you can listen to and implement in your own life. It's easy to stick to what is comfortable, but this hampers personal and professional growth. That is why it's important to broaden your horizons. If you told me a year prior to this experience that I would be working for the Afghan mission, I would not believe you. I really didn't know anything about Afghanistan, and I certainly did not think that I would be working for this government. By the way, the government that I worked for was not the Taliban. It was a prior government. It was a democratically elected one. And so I wanted to take all that I've learned and share it with other young people through Diplomacy Decoded. But obviously not all of us can do this and work at the United Nations after just a couple cold calls. So what am I actually asking you to do? I'm not expecting all of you to go out there and solve the climate crisis. Rather, I think you should all pick one issue that is immediately affecting you or someone that you know. It does not have to be a huge issue. It can be that your town does not have a composting bin. And so you go and you try and make a difference. And this can be achieved through following the agent of change formula. First, try and identify why this issue exists. This can be done through speaking to at least 3 experts. I challenge you to speak to maybe your local mayor or a city council person, or maybe a representative from a food waste organization. Now, it's your turn to be an agent of change. Bring together at least 2 other people who are also affected by this issue. Then, start brainstorming. Start brainstorming ideas how you can address this issue. Then, crystallize these ideas into a 1 to 2 page proposal. Then present this proposal to someone who has the power to address it. Finding this person can be done by cold emailing, reaching out on LinkedIn, or simply by showing up in person and asking. There's no harm in asking ever. And hopefully you will be successful. You will be a successful agent of change. However, that is not the most important part of this process. In fact, it's maybe the least important part of this process. Going through this process is crucial to developing who you are as a person, as you will overcome obstacles, building your tenacity. You will develop public speaking and presentation skills by crafting a well-thought-out proposal. And you will sharpen your communication and leadership skills by bringing together a team that acts on one mission. And so the agent of change formula is very important, not only if you want to be a public servant. Rather, it's important for every single skill set and every industry, because everyone wants a change maker. It's up to you to go out there in your field of interest and make a change and make it better. And so the people who solve the climate crisis will use some of the elements of the agent of change formula to do this. And I'll leave you with one quote that really resonates with me, and I think will resonate with you too. The time for action is now. It is never too late to do something, said by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And so I hope that you come away from this talk with an urgency and also something that's driving you to make a civic difference. Thank you.